Hello, and it's time for Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. All I'm going to say about this week's video, my top 8 worst SummerSlam moments, is the comment section would be a whole lot lighter if I just added the phrase Lex Luger's one and only title shot at that time before WrestleMania 10. I'm sorry. Like what you like, don't be a dick, let's begin. NXT begins as Karrion Kross takes on Danny Birch, who's looking for some revenge after Kross jumped him backstage in a bit last week. By the way, Vic Joseph replacing Tom Phillips on commentary this week. His opening remarks say he's happy to be sitting there with Mauro and Beth, even though we all know they're not physically together. Mauro and Beth are in their home studios. Anyway, starts out really hot for Birch because he gets the shots in right away, but it's all Kross for the most part. Danny does get the Kross face locked in, but Karrion powers out of it, hits the Doomsday Saito, and the Kross jacket to win. Solid match and a good win for Karrion Kross here at the end. Then Keith Lee shows up. He's got a clipboard in his hand, Karrion and Scarlet Powder, and then Keith calls him a bitch for that. Basically says, you know, this is the contract for our NXT Championship match at TakeOver. I even promised I wouldn't lay a hand on you until that match. I've signed it, Regal signed it, it's your turn. So they finally sign the contract, or Kross looks at it, he signs it and everything. They hand it back, but not before Scarlett seals it with a kiss. She slides it back in there, and the fact they're taking so long for this thing to happen where Keith picks up the clipboard, you know something's going to happen. But sure enough, Keith opens the thing up, and it's a big fireball with an added froosh sound effect they added in post. And so Keith is blinded by the fireball and everything. It's a really cool visual, even though like the setup was like very obvious for something to happen. When it happened, though, I still thought it was very impressive. And then, you know, there's so much focus on him recovering. He's like selling all the way through Full Sail. I just wanted the whole rest of the show to be a split screen of Keith Lee just selling his eye and his burn and everything while the rest of the show is going on completely just normal and everything. But all it did was completely dominate the next match, Drake Maverick versus Killian Dane. It's a good match if you care to watch it, but 98% of it is covered by picture-in-picture, also cuts away to Keith Lee selling the injury and being taken care of by officials. And so then after all that, after this entire match they are wrestling, and again, it's a really solid match these guys have here. The size difference, it makes for a more compelling action. As we come out of commercial break, Keith Lee rolls off in the ambulance, and in comes Undisputed Era in their car. And they hop out, they storm the ring, they jump Drake Maverick and Killian Dane, and that's how the match ends. Wow, I'm sure glad they kept Drake Maverick around after all the big releases for this kind of action he's in. Adam Cole gets on the microphone and calls out Pat McAfee and saying, you know, you kicking me last week didn't mean anything because my hands were behind my back. He dares Pat to show up to NXT next week as they have their match confirmed. We find out later in the show that the match between them, yes, we have a match between Adam Cole and Pat McAfee at TakeOver next weekend. So that's confirmed, and Pat has said he will be at NXT next week. That's their last chance to make me care about this angle, basically. And I know some people said in the comments section and on Twitter and everything, well, you probably would say, you'd probably love it if AEW did this sort of thing. And like, no, I wouldn't. And you know how I know that? Because I love Chris Jericho, and I fucking hated the Chris Jericho-Mike Tyson segment. But as far as the whole opening goes, from the beginning of the show with Karrion Kross and Danny Birch to the end of the Maverick-Dane match where the Undisputed Era run in, I like the fact that they were bleeding all these different angles together, kind of making it feel more unpredictable. I've always liked that, but I did feel kind of bad just for the wrestlers involved actually wrestling a match and having like all of it obscured by commercial, split screen, picture-in-picture. Just take as much emphasis from the actual match away as possible. At that point, why even have them wrestle? Tyler Breeze takes on Santos Escobar in non-title action up next. Tyler wants some revenge after last week's big kidnapping from Legado del Fantasma. It's an okay match as Breeze finally gets the upper hand of the big comeback. Suddenly, Joaquin Wilde and Raul Mendoza, who by the way were told by Santos to stay in the back, let him handle it, show up and then distract him, allowing for Santos to hit the Phantom Driver to win the match. And then afterward, Fandango shows up with a sling and a cane. He starts swinging, but the numbers game is too much for Breezango. Out comes Isaiah Swerve Scott to even the odds, chasing the baddies away, furthering the feud there that's kind of brewing here between Scott and Escobar. You know, that the clash between those guys for the title is inevitable. But first, who's thinking six-man next week? We get a little video package of Dakota Kai hyping up her title match against Io Shirai next week at TakeOver. Then we get a follow-up promo from Ridge Holland talking about how he's going to be in that second chance match against Johnny Gargano to get that last spot in the ladder match at TakeOver. Our next match sees Indy Hartwell versus Mia Yim, who is out of breath in the backstage area. She apparently just got back from the hospital after being being there with her boyfriend Keith Lee, who got burned at the top of the show. She says, you know, he's going to be okay, but she's got to focus on her match. It's a pretty good, relatively short match. Hartwell tries to take advantage of Yim's emotional state, but Mia's able to fight back, snap out of it, and get back into the thick of things. She wins with a really unique kind of inverted armbar, where instead of pulling back when the opponent's on their back, Indy's on her stomach, and she's got her head braced down. She pulls the arm backward, pushes it upward, I should say, allowing Indy to tap. That was pretty different. Our next match is a couple of big boys in action as Damian Priest takes on Bronson Reed. Some tense words were exchanged in the parking lot last week leading to this matchup. I love how Reed is able to throw around Damian Priest with relative ease throughout the matchup here. There's a couple of moments where just before the throw, you see this look of shock and panic on Damian's face, which I love. I mean, facial expressions and telling a story with your face is just as important, if not more so, than telling it with the rest of your body, whatever moves you might be doing. The face is the biggest indicator, I think. Priest with a pretty cool like springboard somersault attack, which looks good. He goes for it again, but he gets caught. Reed goes for the big top rope splash. He misses, and that doesn't look very good, but he definitely makes contact with Priest on the way down. It was kind of ugly. But then Damian goes for the reckoning, but Bronson's able to counter out of it and rounds up rolling up Damian for the win. And hot damn, I'm loving how they're booking Bronson Reed lately. Underdog no more. I think they've been doing a really good job building him up and making him look like a real legitimate contender going into TakeOver. And I really hope that his performance in the ladder match is good. We get a rebuttal promo from Io Shirai where a couple of good burns toward Dakota Kai here, where she says, "No one knew who you were until you attacked Tegan Nox last year at War Games, and I'll always remember you as the scared little girl who was frightened by Shayna Baszler." Damn, that's cool. I like this promo here. We go to our next match as Kacy Catanzaro and Kaden Carter take on the extremely unlikely pairing of Mercedes Martinez and Aaliyah. Now, Mauro Ranallo has had all week to come up with a slam dunk killer reference to the WAP music video, and all he can come up with is, "Oh, the ladies' action in the NXT is hotter than a Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion music video." Like, that's the best you can come up with, Mauro. Come on, I know you're better than that. Robert Stone's on the microphone before the match, offering Kacy a spot in the brand, telling her to ditch the loser in Kaden Carter, but she's very physical in her refusal. It's an alright match here. It ends when Mercedes hits the air raid crash on Catanzaro. Then afterward, Aaliyah is very celebratory, and Mercedes just like wants nothing to do with her. I do like that they're kind of playing up with the fact that these two have no chemistry as characters and personalities, and they're trying to make that work. Robert's trying the best he can to make these two gel. Rhea Ripley then shows up. She and Mercedes has fight, but Aaliyah gets in there, makes it 2-on-1. In comes Shotzi Blackheart to break things up and even the odds. Past couple of days ago, she had her car stolen, unfortunately, and all her gear was in there. She's in her street clothes here, but ready to fight. I like the idea of like a Shotzi Blackheart, Rhea Ripley tag team. I think that would be a pretty good combination just in terms of their style and their aesthetic to take on the baddies here in Mercedes and Aaliyah. It's time for dinner with the Garganos. We see Johnny and Candice LeRae in matching tracksuits, very adorable. Candice is trying to read us a bedtime story to her dog. It's a very thinly veiled reference toward Tegan Nox. They're doing the whole thing where they're talking to each other and then they look at the camera and they do the dark, scary effects and everything. Johnny talks about how you can't have a takeover without Johnny Takeover and how he hopes to, win the match next week to get in the ladder match, become the North American champion once again. And then afterward, he fixes the light bulb because he's on the top of the ladder, fixes the light bulb. He says goodnight to Doc Hendricks on the wall and they go to bed. I'm not knocking this promo, but I finally realized what these Gargano home promos remind me of. They're like E-Fed promos. It's exactly the same thing. It's like slice of life, day in the life of like these wrestlers, and they're going to talk to each other, but also talk to like the invisible camera to cut their promo. With cameras here, better talk about our opponents. It's the exact same thing, and it just takes me way back to like middle school, high school days. BZW, baby. Time for some more Thatch as Thatch can. This week, T. Thatch talks about learning to adapt after he lost 2 weeks ago in the triple threat match, so he's just hurting more faceless fools. Then we go to our triple threat. It's the final triple threat match to qualify for the ladder match at TakeOver. You have Kushida versus Cameron Grimes versus a mystery opponent, and it's the returning Velveteen Dream, who we've not seen since TakeOver in Your House. So, all those accusations surrounding him and the evidence that he sent nudes to minors, that's all been resolved, I take it? Yes? No? That being said, despite my feelings about Velveteen coming back, it was still, objectively, a good match. I think it was probably the best match of the night on NXT for the week. I think Dream was a house of fire because, he gave a lot, but he also took a lot as well. Kushida kind of being a close second in that regard. The finish happens when Dream goes to the Dream Valley Driver, but Kushida counters it into the hoverboard lock. In the middle of all that, Cameron Grimes swoops in with a cave into Kushida, rolls Dream out of the ring, covers Kushida to win. So he is a lock for the ladder match now. And then after the the match, we see Dream kind of like snap on Kushida, slapping him around and stuff, and then he poses, turns around, and Finn Balor is there. These two are facing off next week for the last spot in the ladder match, and that's how the show ends. So again, ignoring the problems with Dream right now, that notwithstanding, from what I'm gathering from this, after his return, Dream appears to be turning heel now, and I think that is actually a good thing in terms of just booking and overall storytelling, because I even said last week NXT has a real problem where they're trying to find top-level heels. And I think that Dream, for all his history he's had in the brand, and I think he's probably done all he can as a babyface if he's not going to win the NXT Championship, I think him going back to being a heel where he was when he began, that's probably the better move for him, and I could see him as like a really, competent, really good, mid to top level heel. But again, the controversy, which has never been resolved, it rears its ugly head again by bringing him back like this. Dynamite opens this week with Jim Ross saying we have some invited fans this week and they're playing by the rules. And the first guy you see in the shot is a dude who has his mask under his nose. You'll love to see it. The opening matchup sees the Young Bucks take on Evil Uno and Stu Grayson of the Dark Order. Before the match happens, though, some of the other Dark Order goons jump Nick and Matt before the match begins. Then Evil Uno and Stu just saunter on in for the match to begin. There's a cool spot here in the match where Matt, who spent a lot of the match laid out, has to run under the ring to escape the goons, gets caught by Uno, and then drop with a neck breaker after an unwilling referee assist. Kind of a cool spot there. Lots of really cool, innovative spots in this matchup. A lot of things that you rarely see or just haven't seen before. They throw Matt out of the arena again, and then the goons block the entranceway. They go for the fatality, but Matt is able to, or actually Nick, I should say, is able to avoid that and rolls up Uno for the surprise win. I thought it was a pretty cool opener. It's time for MJF's latest campaign speech. He's in the ring with his podium and his campaign staff, and he berates his female assistant, and they bring up the poll numbers. This week, MJF is up 500%, and Moxley is down 1,000%. That stuff is hilarious to me. MJF goes on and on and on in the statement, this speech he's making about how Moxley's not here tonight. But the thing is, minutes before this, we just saw a promoted, hey, Moxley's gonna be here tonight. That's in the cards. So either MJF's character doesn't know that Moxley's there and has been promoted, or there's communication breakdown where MJF was told, hey, talk as though Moxley's not here, and oh, we're gonna still put this thing that he's gonna be there. So that irked me a little bit, and I have a hard time kind of articulating it further. It just makes somebody in the chain of command look really dumb, either in kayfabe or in the real world. And the thing about MJF is he's not a dumb heel. He's a prick, but he's a smart prick. So for him to not know that, I thought was kind of against his character. Anyway, as he's going on about it, he actually lays down on the mat and says the only way that Moxley would like a wrestler if he lays down for him and whatnot. Then Moxley's theme plays. MJF tells his guys to go up to the stairs to cut John off, but instead, Moxley comes out through the entranceway, jumps MJF, hits him with a paradigm shift, and he leaves. And Moxley in the back, he gets to the mic and says they're still not even, and they will not be even until after All Out. I thought it was a good segment overall. I think, MJF's mic work is great, but again, I'm just really hung up on the discrepancy where it's MJF's whole speech is about how Moxley's not there, despite the fact we just saw a big title card saying that Moxley is there and is going to be talking. So even whether it's intentional or not, why would you make MJF, or anyone in that matter, why would you make them look dumb by saying that? We see Matt Hardy being interviewed backstage. He has more than a dozen stitches in his head after the brutal-looking chair attack by Sammy Guevara last week. Matt says that he is going to be cleared in 10 days, which is the same day as AEW's special edition of Dynamite on Saturday night, which is going to be running the same time as TakeOver. Oh, that's great to know. But Matt is hopping mad. He wants to take all his rage out on Guevara. He starts attacking some guy who he thinks is Sammy Guevara, but instead it's an overdressed referee. So Matt's gone absolutely cuckoo crazy here, but they are kind of burying the lead with this segment that there's going to be a Dynamite next week, not on Wednesday, but on Saturday, and the time with that and TakeOver is going to overlap. Can't we just not? Up next, Cody defends the TNT Championship against Scorpio Sky of SCU, and the big story here, folks, is the TNT title has finally been finished. It's been gold-plated, they've added new designs to it and everything. It looks like a proper finished championship and so much classier looking than the original TNT belt, the unfinished belt, which did get a lot of scorn and mockery when it was first unveiled several months ago. What do you think about the finished design? Let me know in the comments. Scorpio's entrance is very subtle this week. He literally kicks down a door out the entrance tunnel. And by the way, Mike Chioda, former longtime WWE official who was laid off back in April and all the big pandemic layoffs and in the company. He's working here refereeing this match. Good to see him getting some work once again. And this match was great, by the way, folks. I think Scorpio looked really good here in defeat. He kicks out of one crossroads, but not the other, sadly. And I was kind of hoping this would be kind of like the big turning point where it's like, hey, the belt's finished, looks nice and shiny and new, and Scorpio's got this kind of little mini arc here where he's really trying to like pursue singles gold and whatnot. Like, let's hotshot this and let's give it to Scorpio. Let's shake things up. But that didn't end up happening, and I was a little bit bummed by it. But after the match, we see Brodie Lee appear on screen. He's big into stealing belts, folks. A month or two ago, he stole Jon Moxley's AEW title, and this week he's got Cody's original TNT championship, the unfinished silver version of the big red belt. And he says, you know, he's coming for TNT, for Cody's TNT title at the special Saturday Dynamite, but don't worry, I'll give this one back to you when I'm done beating you. That was kind of some nice little exclamation point in the promo. I like they're keeping Brodie and the Dark Order very relevant right now. I think the fact that it is kind of derivatives, like, hey, let's have him just keep stealing belts. That's his gimmick for some reason. You know, it's like, I know they're not doing the whole, there's no parallels between him and Vince McMahon anymore, but I'd love for him to steal a belt and go, you don't have it anymore, it's mine. There's the weird crooked, like, the old middle finger thing like Vince did at Breakdown 98. But yeah, they're keeping him relevant right now. Like I said a week or two ago, I feel that the Dark Order is probably the best it's looked in a while, and you get the feeling they wanted him to be at this level sometime before now. But it's finding a better late than never. Now it just kind of feels right, and I'm looking forward to the Cody-Brodie Lee match. Kenny Omega and Hangman Page defend the tag titles against Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus of the Jurassic Express. I wasn't really feeling this matchup here. It felt like it was at a kind of a different pace than like what we're used to with Page and Omega, even with the Jurassic Express. I feel with them there's a certain energy, like in every match I see them in, that I'm always captivated by. But I thought I really didn't see that one because Jungle Boy spent most of the matches getting the fuck beat out of him, and like that was pretty much it. Luchasaurus didn't feel like he was that much of a factor in this thing. Ultimately, it ends with the V-Trigger Buckshot combo onto Jungle Jack for the tag champs to retain. I thought there was a point in the middle that actually kind of made me laugh where like Omega kind of like bleeding to the heel thing again, where it's like he goes for a Snapdragon on Jungle Boy, gets tossed out of the ring. Marco Stunt is just laughing at him, and for that crime, Kenny hits him with a Snapdragon on the floor, and then he like almost totally drops Jungle Boy, who almost kills himself in a dive. So Kenny catches him, hits a Snapdragon on the floor as well. But yeah, the match ends, the champions retain, and that's pretty much that. I just felt like compared to other matches we've seen with all these competitors, just felt like something was lacking tonight. Backstage, Santana and Ortiz have the best friends gear. They stole that after having stolen Sue's van last week. They throw it in the shower and dump bleach all over it and say they will never apologize to Sue. Those bastards. Speaking of tag teams, it's time for FTR Presents Tag Team Appreciation Night. You see FTR and the Young Bucks joined in the ring by the Brainbusters, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and the Rock and Roll Express. And Ricky Morton's wearing a York Foundation t-shirt, and Robert is wearing a shirt for the Gibson brothers with himself and his late brother, also named Ricky. The next several minutes feels like a big mutual admiration society where all four teams are kind of taking turns putting each other over. The Bucks put over the Rock and Roll Express, FTR put over the Brainbusters, Arn puts over them, and Ricky and Robert put over them. And then finally, Tully Blanchard is the one who breaks the pattern here and says, hey, you guys don't have championships, so you ain't shit. Also, by the way, Arn, I'm still mad at you for last year what you did to me at All Out. And while Tully's going off, suddenly Shawn Spears appears on stage. Arn begins to take his leave. Ricky slaps Tully in the face, and I wouldn't call it a pull-apart brawl, it's more of a pull-apart scuffle. That's more of the speed we have here. In the scuffle, though, Dax Harwood appears to injure his leg. It's some phantom attack on his leg. He just kind of takes a dive, sells it, takes his knee brace off, and then he and Cash jump R&R. They hit Ricky with a double-team pile driver, and then Page and Omega run FTR off. This segment began to get old in a real big hurry when they were just kind of like putting each other over back and forth. Like it was cute at first, and then when it just kept piling on and get kind of monotonous. So thank God for Tully Blanchard for breaking the pattern here, getting the heat, and then the attack by FTR at the end, firmly putting them in heel territory. I thought was a really good way to end it. Backstage, Alex Marvez interviewing Mike Chioda, but who shows up but Chris Jericho? Jericho begins to reminisce with Kiki, as he calls him, but the good old days and their shared past and experiences and everything. Jericho brings up how many years ago he bailed Chioda out and saved his job, and how here now he's going to be refereeing the Orange Cassidy Jericho match, and he wants him to do the right thing. And Chioda's like, I'm going to call it down the middle. And Jericho's like, that's what we can call it. Wink. And by the way, if you do the right thing, I can help you get a job here in AEW. So Mike Chioda is muy conflicted. The women's champion, Hikaru Shida's in non-title action against Heather Monroe, who's a California-based wrestler trained by Santino Brothers. She's worked all up and down the West Coast and all over the world too. She's wrestled in China, I believe, as well. So really cool to see her getting this AEW debut here. That being being said, not much to speak about it because she gets almost no offense in, and she ends up tapping out in pretty short order into kind of a stretch muffler type move. And then after the match, Hikaru's on stage being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, and she's like, I'm waiting for my next challenger, who I guess we won't be meeting tonight. You know, for a company that claims to listen to the fans, and there's plenty of evidence to support that they do that, there's still a lot of like tone deafness and refusal to listen when it comes to like the women's division. And I know there's a lot of handcuffs, it's kind of like holding down the women's division right now, where there's a lot of women who are overseas and can't come to America, or a lot of the women are hurt. You know, I get that, but like there's got to be some kind of stopgap you could have. The fact that, you know, we're a week and a half away from your big Saturday show, and there's like no promotion like what the women's champion's going to be doing on that show, and God knows what's going to happen for All Out. Like, come on, is there going to be any build toward this championship in the near future? Anyone? Bueller? We get a backstage promo with Jake Roberts hyping up Lance Archer again, but the point, what Jake is saying here, I couldn't even pay attention to it because the story is the background again, where Lance is beating the hell out of some smaller guys. And then find out at the end, Lance like gets impatient with Jake because he hasn't said the catchphrase yet, so he rips off Jake's shirt and like lifts it over his head to reveal that the phrase "everybody dies" has been written on Jake's back. That felt like a bit of an odd departure from the dynamic we're used to seeing with Jake and Lance. I felt it was much darker and more kind of twisted and mysterious when they debuted, and then like Jake putting the guy over as he's hucking dudes hither and yon was funny the first time, but now we're seeing just like him do it again, and now like Jake's kind of like a victim of Lance. Why did he have the phrase written on his back already? Was that prepared? It's like, you know, it just felt kind of weird, felt kind of off. Main event time, it's a Fyter Fest rematch, a $7,000 obligation match as Chris Jericho takes on Orange Cassidy. Orange starts out fast and furious from the get-go this time. He's not doing the slow ramp-up we are used to seeing with him, but Jericho does cut him off. A great, big, long, like hanging vertical suplex by Jericho that takes place during commercial break, and as we come out of it, that's when he finally lets go of it. It's kind of cool to see him bust a move out like that. Jericho grabs the bat near the end of the match, and Mike Chioda, the referee, tells him not to use it, but Jericho tells him to do the right thing and just look away from what I'm about to do. So as that's about to happen though, Mike actually takes the bat from Jericho. In come the Best Friends and Santana and Ortiz brawling on the stage to distract Kiki. That allows Jake Hager to slam Orange Cassidy. You think that's the end of the match right there, but Orange ends up kicking out. Cassidy ducks the Judas effect, and it's kind of a cool roll-up. The mousetrap, Taz calls it on commentary, to win in a big old upset. This is easily the biggest win of Orange Cassidy's career, and I am definitely here for it. This match did not, to me, it didn't have like the magic and the spark that I felt with their first match at Fyter Fest, but I think it was still very entertaining nonetheless. Time for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite, and this week I'm saying neither of them win. Here's the thing, with NXT I really wanted to pick them this week, but ultimately the scandal that surrounds Velveteen Dream and all the accusations and all the evidence and the fact that it's not been taken care of as far as I can tell, if he has the evidence to clear his name, then by all means show it. But the fact that they still brought him back after all that when there's so many other people who could get that spot to bring Dream back as this mystery opponent, I thought that was like super tone deaf. That kind of soured my whole vibe for NXT for the whole show. Even though it was on the whole a very strong show, that just really stuck in my craw. Dynamite this week felt a bit like kind of an off week for me. You know, some performers that I'm really excited to see in action most weeks, I felt they kind of under-delivered for me. And also, it's like just more evidence they don't care or put much thought into their women's division right now, and it really shows. I felt that, you know, nothing about Dynamite this week was so special or over the top that it would leap over NXT, even if Dream weren't involved. So I just felt with this week, I just didn't really feel like giving a point to either show. I thought there was just, you know, some good, but also just a lot of head-scratching stuff, some bad stuff in some cases, and so I didn't really feel comfortable picking a winner for either show this week. But let me know what you thought about AEW and NXT this week in the comments section below. As far as how I'll be reviewing the black and yellow brands next week, obviously there will not be a Dynamite on Wednesday, so I'm probably just going to review NXT by itself and give my takeover predictions. And then as far as Dynamite goes, I mean, it's going to be a stacked night on Saturday because I do plan on reviewing takeover as well, but then also now there's Dynamite and there's SummerSlam the following night, so I'm going to have a pretty loaded weekend. I have to figure out how I'm going to do all that. I will let y'all know on social media, but as far as for right now, I can tell you that next Wednesday will just be an NXT review. So at least they'll win that week, hopefully. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.